Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Having defeated Ding Liren, 18-year-old Gukesh has made history as the youngest world chess champion. But can this rising star overcome the formidable challenge posed by Magnus Carlsen, the legendary former world champion and record holder for the highest ELO rating? The match took place in May 2024, before Gukesh officially ascended to the throne of world chess champion. Let's rewind 7 months to witness the dramatic final at the Superbet Poland Rapid Blitz 2024, where the young talent Gukesh and the legendary chess player Magnus Carlsen created a memorable blitz game. In a clash against the highest-rated chess player of all time, Gukesh started with a bold e4. Carlsen met the challenge with a quick g6, and White kept up the pressure in the center with g4. Black responded with d6 to shore up his position. White's knight to c3 joined the battle for the center. Black countered with c6. White developed his bishop to e3. Black's knight to f6 increased pressure on the e4 square. White moved his queen to d2. Black developed his queenside knight to d7. White solidified the center with f3. Anticipating a long castling, Black took the initiative with b5, aiming for an early kingside attack. White responded with h4, preparing a kingside counterattack. Black's knight to b6 threatened Car and the white queen and bishop. White developed his bishop to d3. Black countered with h5, blocking White's pawn advance. White calmly castled long, placing the king in a safe corner. Black developed his bishop to g7, aiming at the center. White's knight to h3 aimed to control f4 and g5. Black exchanged knights, eliminating the threat. White captured on h3, opening the g-file for the rook. Black pushed e6. White aggressively pushed f4, forming a pawn chain on the 4th rank. To disrupt White's plans, Black countered with d5. White advanced to e5, attacking the knight. Black retreated the knight to d7. White brought his rook to g1, increasing the pressure on the kingside. Fearing a kingside attack, Black avoided short castling and retreated his bishop to f8, shifting the focus to the queenside. White surprised Black with a direct attack on the g6 pawn. In this scenario, if Black captured the rook on g6 with the pawn, White will respond by capturing the pawn on g6 and check. If Black retreats the king to e7, White advances to f, opening the way for the bishop to g5 and delivering a checkmate. If Black captures the pawn on e5, White can still deliver check on g5. If Black retreats the king to d7, White captures the pawn on e6, delivering check. If Black retreats the king to c8, White captures the queen on d8. If Black captures the bishop on g6, White retreats the bishop to g5, gaining a significant material advantage with queen versus rook and knight, while Black's king is out of safety and White maintains a strong attacking position. If, when White pushes the pawn to f5, Black jumps the knight to f6 to shield the king, White will respond by moving the bishop to g5, pinning the knight. If Black moves the king to d1, White will capture the pawn on e6 with check. Should Black move the king to 7, White will then capture the pawn on f, threatening to push the pawn to e, creating a double attack and putting Black in a precarious position. Returning to the game, surprised by Gukesh's sacrificial rook move, Carlsen calmly responded with the knight to c4, a double attack on the queen and bishop. White retreated the bishop to g2 to avoid the attack. Here, in the case where Black hastily captures the bishop on e3 with the knight, launching a double attack to target both the queen and the rook, White will sacrifice the rook on e6 with a check. If Black captures the rook with the pawn on e6, White will respond with a bishop check on g6. When Black moves the king to e7, White will advance the queen to g5 for a follow-up check. If Black blocks with the knight on f6, White will capture the knight on f6 with the queen for another check. When black moves the king to d7, white will take the rook with the queen. If black captures the rook on d1 with the knight, white will recapture with the king on d1, leading to a complex position. Returning to the actual game, instead of capturing the bishop on e3 with the knight, Carlsen surprisingly sacrificed his knight on e5 to launch a counterattack. If white captures the pawn on e5, black will capture the bishop on e3 with the knight, attacking both the queen and the rook. Should white move the queen to f3, black will then capture the pawn on g6. If white follows up by capturing the pawn on g6 with bishop and check, black will calmly move the king to d7. At this point, white cannot afford to capture the knight on e3, because black's bishop will come to h6, trapping the queen, and black will have an overwhelming advantage in terms of force. Returning to the game, the trap set by the former world champion could not escape the sharp eyes of the youngest world champion in history. He immediately retreated his rook to g3 to protect the bishop. Black responded by capturing the bishop on d3 with the knight and check, eliminating one of white's attacking pieces. White recaptures the knight on d3 with a pawn, and black continued by taking the bishop on e3 with the knight. White then moves the rook to e3 to capture the knight. After this sequence of exchanges, where two knights were traded for white's pair of bishops, black achieved a relatively comfortable position. Capitalizing on the moment, black captured the pawn on h4 with the queen, attacking the pawn on f4. White defended with rf1. Black developed the bishop to d6, coordinating with the queen to target the f4 pawn. White decided to abandon the pawn and move the king to b1, avoiding a potential pin, and not wanting to leave the king exposed in the center. Black wasted no time, castling queenside to secure the king in a safe position before launching a large-scale offensive. White maneuvered the queen to c2, eyeing the possibility of capturing pawn on b5. In response, black quickly moved the king to b7, avoiding the pin along the c-file. White repositioned the knight to e2 to defend the pawns, while black shifted the rook to g8, seizing control of the open g-file and preparing to infiltrate white's camp. White advanced the pawn to f5, initiating a breakthrough. Black captured the pawn on f5, white to double rooks with rf3, targeting the recapture of the pawn. Black defended by moving the rook to d7, securing the 7th rank. White then pushed the pawn to a4, aiming to disrupt the queenside where black's king was sheltered. Black responded with a6 to reinforce the position. White captured the pawn on f5. Black countered by captured the pawn on h3 with the queen, creating a passed pawn on the h-file. White captured the pawn on f7 with the rook, attempting to exchange rooks to weaken black's 7th-rank defenses. Black slid the rook to c7, creating a shield for the king. White retreated the knight to c1, planning to reposition it to b3, targeting the c5 or a5 squares for a check. Black captured the rook on f7, and white recaptured with a check on f7. Black calmly interposed the rook on c7. White the rook to f6, targeting the bishop. Black advanced the bishop to e7, chasing the rook, which retreated to f2, reinforcing the 2nd rank. Black shifted the queen to e3 attack on the pawn, while white jumped the knight to b3, guarding the d4 pawn and threatening to jump to a5 for a check. However, this move backfired, as black captured the pawn on a4, attacking the knight. If white attempted na5+, the knight could be pinned as black's king would step to b6, threatening the knight. Additionally, white's queen couldn't defend both the knight and the rook simultaneously. White instead moved the rook to e2, attacking the queen. Black responded with qg1+, forcing white to retreat the knight to c1 to block the check. Black then captured the pawn on d4, systematically eliminating white's scattered pawns. while the former world champion maintained relentless pressure, but White's greater concern became Black's passed pawn on the h-file. White shifted the rook to h2 to target the pawn. Black pushed the pawn forward to h4, advancing deeper into White's territory. With the position deteriorating, White moved the knight to e2 to attack the queen. Black responded with qb4, maintaining activity. White attempted nc3 to coordinate with the queen in capturing the pawn on a4. But Black advanced the pawn to a3, directly threatening the heart of White's position. White retreated the queen to d1, hoping to clear the second rank for the rook to defend the pawn. Black, capitalizing on the momentum, developed the bishop to d6, targeting the rook. White avoided the attack by moving the rook to c2. Sensing victory, Black pushed the pawn to h3, leaving it only 2 squares away from promotion. With Black's bishop already positioned to guard the h2 square, the Black pawn could advance to h2 without fear of being stopped by White's pieces. Stuck with limited options, White moved the king to a2, avoiding the Black queen's line of attack along the b-file. Black proceeded to push the pawn further to h2. Instinctively, White captured the pawn on a3, but in response to Gukesh's bold play, Carlsen calmly captured the pawn on a3 with the queen and check. With no other moves available, White was forced to retreat the king to b1. Black then swiftly moved the king to a7, opening the b-file for the rook to attack the White king. At this point, Gukesh, the 18-year-old world champion, had no defenses left and had no choice but to stop the clock and concede defeat. If Gukesh had tried to resist, the game might have continued as follows.